3, 2, 1, go.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Triad of the Force podcast, a podcast from 3 Puerto Rican friends coming together to do deep dives into Star Wars and other nerd-related media. Today, we have a very special episode for you. Us here, very humbly at the Triad, have got another amazing opportunity to join a roundtable, this time talking to Academy Award-nominated Emmy Award-winning composer.
Can you believe that?
Nicholas BRITELL. I can't.
Can you believe that?
I can't believe it.
You just said that, and I was just like, "Wait, what? Is that what actually happened?" And it's like, yes.
That is what actually happened. I mean, from the moment that it was announced that it was him, I mean, I've been obsessed with the score for Succession. It's like obsessed, and then the score for Andor, I mean, I fall in love with it with each episode more and more. So having this opportunity, what was your greatest, I don't know, impression of what happened today?
Well, it was interesting because when we got that email for that opportunity, obviously I was just like, oh my God, this is like
this happening?
It's incredible, especially like living in this post-launch event Andor era that we are in. It's just like, well, okay, so we had done like that.
We have peaked. We're done.
I thought like we did the roundtable with Denise and Cal Soller, Genevieve O'Reilly, and Diego Luna. I was just like, okay, well, enough is enough. I guess like we're good here. Like there's nowhere else to go, and the show's already premiered. We're in the middle of it. I mean, we're past the halfway point of the show, so it's just like there's nothing more to look forward to beyond just like every episode. And all of a sudden, like, we get that invitation. She's like, "Holy crap!" It's like we're not just talking to like some dude, right?
Keep him coming.
Please look at something.
We are very appreciative. I know,
humbled and thankful. It's incredible. Like I'm living in the best and the worst days of my life. Worst because the world is a dumpster fire.
Where do we go from here, too?
The best with Star Wars, absolutely. But to be able to talk to the composer of the show, Nicholas BRITELL, it was such an amazing experience, especially to do it with a bunch of other podcasters with whom like we've been lucky enough to either have met online through podcasting or finally have been able to meet either at Star Wars Celebration or at the Andor launch event. It was a really, really cool experience. Like this time it was a smaller group of people than we had on the last roundtable. So the pacing felt
everybody got to ask their questions.
Everyone got to
which
ask
a plus.
Which is a massive plus. And like, you know, everyone seemed like to know what's going on better. And it was great. It was great to just be, again, like I said last time, like just being a Zoom call with like an incredible artist that's just like doing incredible work for an incredible series. Because I mean, the score for Andor, since we heard it in those first 3 episodes, we could tell it was something really, really special, and not just special, but really, really different, which I think has been the thing that I've been hooked on the most for it. It's just that you know, we've seen other composers come in, like Giacchino and Kevin Kiner, and like all these other guys come in and do their Star Wars work, which has been amazing, but it's always still been very John Williams-y, right? It's still in the vein of what all the original orchestral Star Wars music was,
which is not bad,
because that's the only Star Wars we've ever done, right? It's like Star Wars,
which is not bad, but this is something else, and it really pulls you into each episode, just 100%. Like the changes in the rhythm and everything that's happening. So I think, without talking any more about it, you know, without further ado,
let's listen to it. Like
Roundtable.
You don't want to hear like my impressions from it. You want to hear what the man has to say. So
listen to the actual composer.
Let's roll.
Enjoy.
All right. So our question is, we are loving how each title sequence has a slightly different piece of music, almost like a musical version of the opening crawl in the films. Where did that idea come from, and what was the process for composing a different musical introduction for each episode?
That is a great question. It was interesting. It wasn't something that we knew we were going to do in the very beginning. I worked with Tony for basically 2 years on all the music for Andor for season 1. So it was something that I think about a year and a half ago, when I was presenting him some of the early possibilities for a theme for Cassian, but also really for Andor, for the whole sort of show itself. When I was showing him all the, this one piece, I was showing him all the stems and all the different elements of it. And I was like, I like the big version, but I was like, when you just hear the cellos, it's really beautiful. And also, if you just hear like the synthesizers, it's kind of cool. And so we kind of looked at each other, we're like, I mean, maybe we do a few of these. And then it actually very quickly became something where we realized that there was a concept there of evolving it over the course of the whole season, so that we could tailor each main title to what was about to happen, and sometimes sort of relate to both what has just happened and where we're about to go in the next episode. So it became this kind of like a calibration almost for each episode, and the process of doing it was it was a lot of work. It was every episode. We scored these in, and I can talk a lot about all this for sure, but we scored them in London, recorded with orchestra. I did all the synthesizer work, and basically every single episode that I was scoring, I would say to myself, what is the main title I'm going to do for this? And I would, Tony lives 11 blocks from me, so he was here all the time, sitting on this couch, actually. And I would say, I think this feels good, and we worked so closely together on each of these and tailored each one to sort of what we were feeling at the time.
Thanks, Nicholas. Friends of the Force, you're up next.
Hi there. One of the things I love most about your work is it really feels like your music takes us into the minds of the characters as opposed to just sitting atop them. I think this is super present, especially in the Past to Present suite and in our most recent episode that we saw, episode 8, where we have these beautiful string orchestrations, but this very kind of tilted synthesizer. When you're writing music for Cassian or a particular world, what do you feel like you need to understand about the character or the situation in order to approach writing the music for it?
It's a great question. I think it gets to kind of the heart of the whole process in a way, because I think every project, no matter what it is, every show, every film deserves its own sonic landscape, its own sort of DNA. And the complicating factor on something as epic as Andor is that every episode, in a way, also demands its own approach. So, you were talking about the most recent episode that has its own whole sonic palette in a way. But to calibrate that to sort of get into what it is, especially for Cassian, that was something that it really evolved for me over time. I start every project at zero, like I try to be as blank a slate as possible. And through conversations with Tony, through reading I read these very top secret early scripts, and then starting to see imagery, eventually starting to see footage, and then edited episodes. I feel I'm learning along the way as that's happening. So it's not like there's sort of one thing where I sort of realize, oh, I think this is it. It's actually something about, I experiment with a lot of different ideas. And I think over time, you sort of discover that certain things resonate with the picture. Certain things, when you're, especially like, I did a lot of on-camera music actually before they had shot everything. I mean, that was a whole endeavor unto itself. But once I started like working on episode 1, because we did it in order in that way, and once I started working on episode 1, there were certain things that just it felt like Cassian, like certain motifs, certain progressions. And the thing I knew was that as he evolved, as he learned about himself, as he learned about his universe and the struggle that's going on, that certainly would change. And and it changes through episode 8, certainly changes all the way going. There's a lot more obviously to come. But I think it's sort of an abstract answer, but it's kind of about feeling. It's about feelings. It's about feeling that for Cassian in particular, I think there's this questioning that he's doing that he doesn't even know he's doing. I think sometimes, he doesn't know. He wants to know about his past. He wants to know about his present. But at the same time, I think there are certain things he may never know. And I think the music itself is trying to capture that in a sense. The main title, in a way, you can imagine the main title as being sort of a big immediate concept. I actually wrote the main title, so it starts almost at nothing. It starts like kind of just with this pulsing, this kind of lurking feeling. And as it grows over 35.2 seconds, it goes, it has this final crescendo culmination, and then it goes away as well. So there's this kind of like, it's sort of discovering itself and then it vanishes. And I think maybe there's a metaphor there with Cassian too, that he doesn't know, and then we have glimpses of learning and discovering and realizing, and then maybe something else happens.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jedi News.
Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us, Nicholas.
Sure.
You just mentioned that you start each project with a blank canvas, and then you build from there. So what will you take with you from season 1 as you start to develop and you continue the themes? Obviously, we know where we're going with the characters, but obviously we don't know how they get there.
Right.
So what have you learned, and what will you take with you as you begin to approach the journey in season 2?
Another great question. That's a big question too, that I don't even know the answers to that. I think I would say, the definite starting point I would have, and again, I haven't, I'm talking to Tony right now. We're already planning certain things up, but I haven't actually, begun the official scoring of season 2 yet. But my sense would be as we, like I was saying, as I score a project, you learn as you go, you discover things, which I think is fascinating too. I feel that, it's not a science. This is very much something that every episode sort of teaches you things. And, you might try a theme out in one episode and it really feels right. And then you might try the same theme out in another episode and it doesn't work at all. The film just rejects it, So I have certain themes that I think feel like they're related to the dynamics of the struggle of characters. There are many themes, certainly. There's themes, just big picture. I mean, some of them, there's obviously a sort of Andor scope theme. There's motifs related to Cassian. There's motifs certainly around Mon Mothma and the rebellion. There's every episode has certain unique signatures too that are almost like latent within those episodes. And I'm imagining that there will be a lot of individuation as we go too. So there's probably many things that I haven't yet thought of that we will come to. But I think many of the large scale themes are certainly things that I imagine carrying over. Luthen's theme, which obviously intersects with many things. The ISB theme that I wrote. So those are some of the things that I would imagine. But again, I actually have not read any scripts, so I can't say for sure just about anything.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next up, we have Skytalkers.
Hi, Nicholas. My name is Caitlin from Skytalkers. So nice to talk to you today.
Sure.
You mentioned this previously a question ago, but I wanted to learn some more about the music that was played on set during filming. This seems so cool and special that you got to do this. Without spoiling anything, can you discuss how that decision came about?
Sure. You've seen some of it so far. There's definitely more to come. But it was just for purely almost practical considerations. That was the stuff that Tony and I began with first, because it had to be done, and it was really important to both of us that it be really done on set. So I did a lot of demoing and pre-records, but people actually recorded stuff on set. Some of those things, for example, if I'm thinking like episode 3, the alarm signaling on Ferrix, that was a whole kind of percussion suite that I wrote, and each rhythm had its own meaning that Tony and I would talk about. So there's a rhythm at the very top of it where that sort of signals like a message is coming, and then there's a rhythm for the commencement of the alarm, and then there's other rhythms that sort of join. So that was one example of that we worked on a lot. And it's so complicated too, because you come up with these things and then they're done on set, and then you see how that worked, and then in post you sort of then try to figure out, okay, well, really big questions like, does the score have to be in the same tempo as the signaling, or if it's in the same tempo, does it work or not? And the interesting thing is that there's no right answer for these. Like, so for example, with the signaling, it was important that the score didn't acknowledge it, because when you started acknowledging it, it started feeling like the signaling was score, and it's not. You're seeing it, So that was like, okay, don't do that. But for example, the time grappler, that was another example of on camera. We had to have him, swinging that mallet, and that was something where we actually wrote this very elaborate series of individual musical idents for different times of day, for different instructions that they were giving the people of Ferrix, at different moments of the day. And so that was something where at times the score actually is in the same key as the time grappler, because sometimes it felt weird if it wasn't, so those were the types of things, both in current production, post-production, we had to figure those out. Another example is the Aldani Eye Festival, the chanting and all of that music. I wrote that music. Tony wrote those wonderful lyrics, shall we say, those were all different things, each of which that was very complex too, because the score in those sequences was so large scale, and that was one where it did have to sort of connect in certain ways. So those were some examples of the process and the challenges, and there's definitely more to come. So that's that's what I would say about that.
Next, we have space.com. Jeff, are you there?
Hi, Nicholas. Sorry for the wonky connection here. I'm having some problems with connectivity.
I can hear you.
My question for you is, well, congratulations on such a dignified and distinctive score. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
So my question is, what was the sort of musical recipe that you concocted for the score, and when did you know when you had nailed it?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think I don't know if you ever know if you nail something. I think you're always just putting in the time and the effort, and you're sort of you're going on your instinct that if it's working, if it's resonating for you, for me, my hope is that then it resonates for other people, and if it's working for me and Tony, then I get more confidence that it's working, So it's a lot of it's a lot of time, and it's a lot of effort, really. And the formula, it was really from the very start, Tony and Kathy Kennedy were so supportive and so really clear about wanting a unique soundscape for Andor, and about really, hoping that it could have kind of its own sound palette and unique new themes and textures. And so that really gave me the sense of not just support, but freedom to explore things. And I had this instinct very early on that obviously I love working with orchestras, and it's one of the joys, the greatest joys of being a composer, I think, is getting to write for orchestra. But at the same time, there was something with Andor that immediately, to me, I was drawn to these sort of older analog synthesizers that, and I don't often get to write with a sound palette like that, but there was something about, perhaps it was the idea that I grew up loving Star Wars. I mean, I think Return of the Jedi, I think, was the first, my parents, so I think it was the first movie they took me to in a movie theater when I was like 3, So I love Star Wars, and the idea that this comes before that, this is this kind of earlier than that trilogy. This is before Rogue One. There was something almost like retro that I was thinking like, oh, what would sound like we're before this, And there was something about, to me at least, there was something about this sort of retro analog synthesis that felt like we were going to the before stages of something that could then grow into, hopefully, what we all know eventually, the sort of majesty that Star Wars is, So that was maybe an early instinct I had, and certainly not everything is synthesizer. There's we recorded with a huge string orchestra and brass and percussion and amazing musicians. So there's all of that. But I think those were some early instincts that I had, and I think the actual orchestration itself really varies episode to episode. That was my other sort of point to myself, I think, was that every episode we're in different planets, we're in different places, we're in different parts of the story. So it felt like it really had to have, each episode had to have its own unique thought process, which certainly added to the work that Tony and I gave ourselves.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
Next, we have Talking Bay 94.
Hi, Nicholas. Brandon from Talking Bay 94.
Hey.
I would love to dive in. This is the most tense show I've ever watched, I feel like, every week. And the music is a huge part of that. And the pulses and the backing behind it is just a huge part of how this show functions. I'd love to dive in to how you've constructed that and how you play that against what's happening on screen.
Sure. There are varying degrees of tension in different episodes, and some of that is really Tony and I, us talking about what's happening and what is, what's the scope of the current endeavor. So there are certain episodes where the tension is really high, and I don't want to give anything away with where things go, but I would say there are certain things that I do perhaps, to add to the tension. One thing that I was doing a lot was there are certain orchestral concepts and certain musical ideas you can do to increase tension. One thing that I added was I felt it was really important that things had to feel like they weren't from Earth. You know what I mean? Like I really wanted it to feel like this is not our galaxy, And so there's you'll hear it in a lot of places. There's a sort of detuning that I do with things quite often in the show, both with real instruments and also with synthesizers, to give a sense of it. I mean, to me, it doesn't just feel in a faraway galaxy. To me, it also feels like something's not quite right, And when you do that, coupled with, for example, rising elements, or when you do that with lurking, pulsing low, I mean, there's a sort of stew that you concoct, and every single one of those, I mean, I would really stress, like, every single moment in the show is a unique musical piece. There's no, we didn't like, I mean, maybe this is our own, like masochism or something like that, but like we really, we wrote every single scene has something unique, and that's, Tony is so passionate about this. I was starting to say it before, but we underestimated how much work this was going to be, and we had already thought it was going to be a lot of work, so that was for sure, but we vastly underestimated how much work this was going to be. We worked constantly on this, like constantly. And so the question about the tension, every single moment where that's happening, you can picture Tony and me right here being like, all right, well, what are we doing here? Like, and then it being like, I don't think it's enough, and there's also certain things too. For example, I think there's often, as things are increasing in scope, for example, I think sometimes the outs of certain scenes rise even to, or crescendo or culminate, so there's a sort of like moment to moment escalation that you might feel in certain episodes, but I think there's also like inside certain of these scenes, there's a gradually increasing something's wrong feeling, probably.
Incredible. Thank you.
Next, we have Triad of the Force.
Hi, Nicholas. It's Gustavo with Triad of the Force. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. My question has to do with like how we create the soundscapes for Andor, and it's rooted with how we experience Star Wars. As for the past 40 years, we've grown so accustomed to what the sounds of Star Wars needs to be based on those original scores from the 9 trilogy films. And now in this, in this new post-Skywalker era with all these composers coming in, there's been a sort of reverence to what Star Wars needs to sound like. And now with Ludwig in Mandalorian, we've gotten to see some departures of what that can be, but still in a way grounded into, that Williams soundscape, so to speak. With Andor, though, it feels like we've broken the wheel and we've kind of, done something completely different, that it's not, rooted in that sense in terms of like having orchestration and synthesizers, and a lot of different percussive elements that we haven't experienced before. So my question is like, how have we reinterpreted what Star Wars sounds like, and how do you decide when to use orchestration versus like synth and electronic elements for like those moments, like in the Niamos Marlana club mix, which is now the best track in the whole of the Star Wars canon, I think.
Thank you so much. Well, the answer is really moment to moment. I mean, you know, like I was saying, it was a constant conversation. I think that in general, towards the beginning of season 1, I wasn't trying to avoid orchestra, but I think there's something dark and very real that Tony was going for. There's a sense that, you know, it's like we're right with Cassian. We're, you know, we're in his POV. We don't know what's happening, and yet we, you know, you see before the episode, you see the Star Wars logo, and yet immediately you're sort of, where are we? And I think that early on, I was trying to almost, you know, really embrace that feeling of you know, maybe this is Star Wars, but maybe this is Star Wars you haven't seen before. This is a part of the galaxy we haven't been to, in a sense, you know, feeling wise, for sure. And so, you know, I adore the John Williams scores. I mean, like, you know, John Williams is beyond a legend to me, you know. But I think in some ways it was a very conscious thing of saying, you know what, we're going for something different here. And when orchestra would come in, I think it felt like it was right. You know, it felt like there are certain elements, I think, especially in the first few episodes. The first time you really have probably a large scale orchestra enter the picture is the end of episode 3, where it's the wraparound, bringing everything sort of together in the past present suite. But also, even there, you're noticing there's a lot of close mic'd individual instruments. It's sort of even mic'd. I even recorded some of the music differently. So I think I was trying to go for a very like intimate feel in some of these things. You know, there's a dark synthesizer edge to things. There is a sort of hard percussive edge to things, but there's also, I think, like a very you know, emotional, close mic'd solo instrument feel at times too. That's sort of some of the first few episodes, even down to hearing the leaves in Canary, you know, that's part of the score. You know, hearing all those different percussive sort of forest elements, you know, sort of like a close feeling, I guess is what I would say. And as the scope of the series increases, and as we learn more, and as the drama increases, to me, that's where orchestra then should enter into the picture even more. You know, there's nothing grander for scope than a beautiful symphony orchestra. And yet, like you were saying on Niamos, there's always room for more synthesizer, I think. So there's definitely, you know, that's not going away. And that's certainly part of, I just feel that's a part of, that became a part of this certainly season 1. And to your point about mentioning the Niamos track, you know, the thing that we thought about when I initially wrote that piece for actually the Morlana club in episode 1, and I had this idea that I pitched to Tony, and he was totally in for it, where I was like, you know, what if the diegetic music in some of these places is this same piece of music that's just sort of this very well-known hit in the galaxy? Like, there's just this piece that, you know, you hear the Morlana club version. When you're in Coruscant, you know, you hear it's like a diplomatic kind of lounge version, you know, and then when you're on Niamos, that's like where it is. That's the galaxy mix of Niamos, you know, you're there, you know. So that was kind of the idea. And it just, you know, I remember saying to him, I was like, when we enter Niamos, I think we have to hear this track, you know.
Oh, wow. That was, I have no words. I mean, I'm so jealous I wasn't able to join. I mean, that's one of the bad things sometimes of Roundtables. Not all of us can be there, but I'm so glad that you had that opportunity. You represented for the Triad, and everybody seemed to
hopefully appropriately. Hopefully
well, and it seemed like everybody was having a really good time. It seems like everybody is a fan of this soundtrack and this amazing composer, which is so lovely to hear, to see, to have people that are really, really appreciating this new era of Star Wars. So what are final thoughts?
That was the really cool thing, though, if listening to everyone else's questions, because while I was kind of coming up with the script of some of the options, because that's the thing with this, like we discussed last time. You have to have a bunch of questions ready.
At least 10 questions, and then start.
Just in case someone asked them before you.
Yep.
And this time, as you saw, we went alphabetically, so like
it's a little harder.
So like
the triad is last.
There's a blessing and a curse. You don't want to go first, but last is also worse because people might ask all your questions. So I thought everyone was gonna like go through the list of everything that like I had written down.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting to see how different people are like
how it
approaching
went.
the score and the music in different ways, and to see that they're thinking about it in a different way from how you think about it, and then see how Nicholas was reacting to that was like really, really fun. But it was very insightful. He said a bunch of things there that hopefully people latch on to, because they might be hints to season 2, maybe they're not. Some really cool insights about a couple of really cool tracks, especially the Niamos Morlana Klopp mix, which is that song from the Beach Planet. He said some really cool things.
It's just
about
so
that,
good.
Thanks to yours truly. So hopefully everyone enjoyed it, and hopefully we maybe in the future keep doing some of these things so that we can keep having even deeper dives. Because how much deeper can you get into Star Wars than to actually talk to the people that are involved in making,
that are creating this amazing content that we're getting right now. So
really good stuff, and hopefully everyone enjoyed it.
So I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we did. I hope you're enjoying Andor as much as we have. We still have a few more episodes to go. We have a whole nother season. It's exciting times, and there's still so much good Star Wars coming our way. So until next time, we are Triad of the Force. Look at us wherever podcasts can be found. Just search Triad of the Force and you will find us. Like, subscribe, leave us a comment, hate us, love us. It's all good as long as it's constructive. So until next time, may the Force be with you.